And what he said was, he said, what is India? You know, he said, you son of a bitch, do you think it's your fucking pride? Yeah? And that's because that's what it came down to. In other words, where were you people for 26 years while we were dying, suffering and getting ill with the cancers and the birth defects? Now that the American is not in court, you suddenly discover that this is a national scandal. So his view and my view is I don't want to belong to a country like that. I don't see India here. I look around and I see this huge, beautiful land full of very poor people. And I don't think it has a name, because there's no name that it has that I'm aware of. And they call it, you know, the Kingdom of the Poor. So that I believe in, the Republic of the Poor. They won't call it India. It's a much better place. Sorry to sound like a tin pot revolutionary here.
No, I agree with a lot of what you said. I mean, of course, I still travel on an Indian passport and I get held up every third time I go traveling. So in that sense, like, I cannot totally move away from this notion of India as a state. But of course, it's a state with a lot of flaws, and something like, say, if you even go out in public in India and say that you think that the Maoists are not altogether wrong, you'll be in serious trouble, as Arundhati discovered when she wrote a couple of papers, a couple of articles. On the other hand, what's happening in India is, of course, part of a much larger issue. One of the reasons why the Maoists have come back and why one cannot dismiss them, even though the Indian media would much rather have them dismissed as terrorists or whatever, is, of course, the consequence of what is neoliberalism. The fact that the Indian government, in order to make the country shine, decided to lease out large areas of productive land or land with mineral resources to private companies. And these companies moved in, they herded together entire villages of Aboriginal people, tribals we call them in India. We are not that politically correct yet. Tribals, and dumped them from out of that neighborhood somewhere else in the name of rehabilitating them. And obviously these people who were already impoverished, once they were marginalized even further, moved towards various kinds of revolutionary militancy. So the problem again is India has to shine by definition. If India doesn't shine, India is in serious shit. Okay, but in order to shine, we have to forget that the metaphor shining India, which is used, is actually in some ways very apt, because shining, of course, is something. It means that something gleams. It also means that it can be blinding. And large areas of what's happening in India are not visible because we have been blinded by that shining. On the other hand, the tragedy of the matter is that if India at the national level stops shining, it will be punished internationally. Today we don't have an option to stop shining because no other option is allowed globally. Neoliberalism in India is a consequence of neoliberalism in the world. So in that sense, okay, it might be more visible in India. But the only reason it's not visible in places like Denmark is that places like Denmark are more affluent. That's it. So in that sense, it becomes very difficult to simply blame the politicians of India. Of course, they have to be blamed. Most of them are corrupt. Many of them are just not capable of running even a bus, let alone a country. But apart from that, they are also in some ways caught in a system, a discourse that for some reason they believe is the only option. And to some extent, it is the only option. Because what can India do if today India renegages on its deals with neoliberal international capital? Think of what would happen to India. Think of what would happen to international capital. Think of how industries will collapse in India overnight, I think. It happened in many third world countries that have reneged on this kind of implicit agreement that all of us have with neoliberal, floating neoliberal global capital.
should literature represent those things? I mean, do we get the right picture of India from the way that we read literature about India in the West?
Well, I suppose it depends what literature you read, but there are enough books which never make any mention of these things, and as Tabish said, Arundhati Roy, who has spoken out about these matters, has been very greatly vilified in the country because it's just not done to criticize the economic miracle, and and the young, I'm sorry to say, they want Amir Khan and Bollywood and their iPhones and Tata cars and all the rest of it, and they're not seeing, and what nobody ever talks about is how the shining India, the economic miracle, doesn't touch the lives of 85% of the people, and we've had 250,000 farmer suicides in 10 years, something like that, and these things are not talked about, I don't know. So that's why I think when the Maoists say that not only that the country needs a revolution, but they're providing it, well, I'm not going to say anything against them, I'm not going to speak up and say that violence is the answer either, because I'm too cowardly to do so, but I'm not going to speak against it, no. So should you discuss these things? Well, why not, if it makes a good story? And after all, what is the only duty of a novelist is to tell a good story, to have good characters and make you laugh and cry, as Dickens said, Other than that, surely it's up to you.
And I think we should just give it up for both Indra and Tabish. Thank you for coming here. Og som jeg nævnte før, Indra signerer bøger over ved Kims stand herovre bagved, og hvor man kan købe Dyrets Folk til halv pris her i dag. Og det er en fantastisk god roman, jeg kan varmt anbefale.